This week I was in a conversation with one of my colleagues at school, and as many of you know, I'm in seminary and I'm in my last 2 semesters, and I am in the mode. Just imagine if you do play sports or you're trying to meet deadlines, right? I grew up as a basketball player all my life, so when the fourth quarter comes, and if the score is like we're down by two, what usually happens in that moment is I turn it up, right? I turn up the heat, as they say. Is my engine, it just goes up another notch, and that's how it's in a way that's how I'm looking at it in these last 2 semesters. Is I'm just going at 100 miles per hour and trying to achieve the goal of finally graduating, right? But in the midst of that, right, in the midst of all of that, there's this overwhelmness, and there's this humanness about it, about this human experience of trying to achieve and trying to reach your goal. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to achieve a degree. But as we were talking, and we've known each other for the duration of my career at seminary, but it was just this moment of it was so amazing in a way, where because we were just barely getting to know each other, but there was a moment where there's this vulnerability of I was telling this other person that I was just, you go into seminary, you go into your master's program or whatever program you're part of, and you start to see these other students and your other colleagues like, man, they're so smart, right? They're just they can attain so much information, and they're able to really just connect with the text and connect it with their mind and their heart, and you start to see that. And what happens is, as for me, is, man, I don't know if I can fit in this. This is what I was telling my colleague, and I don't know if I can fit in this mold of just the students that are being shaped and getting the knowledge that they are that we're getting from our program, and I'm so grateful for it, right? But there's the human side of just saying, man, I don't know if I can hang with this, or I like the term that we both use. I feel like the black sheep of seminary, because I just feel like an oddball, right? And because of my background, and man, I'm going into seminary, and my colleagues have been doing this all their life practically, and it's like, man, like, where do I fit in? But the next day, the next evening, we had class together, and I was just telling him, it was just that moment of me being able to open up and be vulnerable for that moment, because I did want to tell somebody, right? It's just, it was just that moment of, man, he ended up, he even said, yeah, me too. Like, I feel that way. And it started getting me think that, especially in our circle, in the evangelical circle or the Christian circle, or because I grew up in church all my life, right? Even anywhere else, I think, not even just in the church, even in the workplace, right? It's hard to be vulnerable with people because you have to appear a certain way. And I get that, right? There's this game that you play in the workplace, this political workplace, because you're trying to move up the chain. And so any type of weakness that is shown could be perceived as incompetent, right? And that's the problem, I think, in our culture, not in our culture and in ourselves, where it's hard to open up to people. It's hard to be vulnerable to people, because it's just, at least I'm speaking on behalf of myself, that because we want to appear that we have everything in our life together, when in fact, that's not true, right? And there's something I was reading, and it just kind of correlates with what I'm talking about today. It says this: we have a present challenge in our moment right now, in our society, in our culture, even in the church world, and even within ourselves, is Will we acknowledge the ugliest parts of our culture and in ourselves rather than covering up the truth of what is so? And our impulse is, we would say something so vague, right? When we have our conversation, we'll say something vague about what's going on in our life. But we want to maintain this illusion that we are pure, that we are whole, that we have everything together. And I'm starting to realize if we are brave, if we are strong enough to do that, to let go. I'm talking to myself, okay, too, because it's very easy to pretend. But if we let go of this pretend world where everything is wholesome and decent, we have no choice but to take responsibility for the ugly parts. Because anything evolutionary or everything revolutionary, anything that needs change in our planet, in our culture, in our society, we have to have the level, we have to demand it of ourselves, we have to demand it of our society and our culture for honesty. We have to demand honesty of where we're at in our lives individually, and demand honesty of where we're at culturally and in our society or in our country. And it says this as I was reading this, it says, we are in a time of humble reckoning where the more we cover up things, the more we try to pretend, the more we try to uphold our wholesome purity and perfect image, the more it starts to stink. The more you rub people the wrong way. And it reminds me of ancient scripture of Jesus. And he was calling out the scribes and the Pharisees. He was calling them out for their pretend world, or as forgive me for my colorful language, of their BS. And it says in Matthew 23, Jesus was calling them out, not just to call them out, just to call them out. He was calling them out to invite themselves to finally just look at themselves from within, and to try to see their lives, the truth of their lives, that this pretend world that they're living in is not working anymore. And it says in Matthew 23, it says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You know, Jesus was just going on, just straight shooter, right? Jesus says, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful. When the outside looks beautiful, but in the inside they are full of the bones of the dead and all kinds of filth. But man, Jesus didn't hold back. This was probably just the language that they think that Jesus said, interpreted. But I think it was very hurtful, right? And it says in this, in his woe to you call, he hopes for a responsive awakening. Jesus is hoping for a response of awakening. And this is something that I'm working out in my life. Oh man, I'm not perfect. Ask my wife, right? And ask my kids. But I'm coming to a point to where, man, pretending becomes debilitating. It becomes so tiresome. It becomes so, because you have to put more effort to pretend, to keep up this image that you're trying to keep up. It's tiring. Amongst everything else that's going on top of our lives, that we're still trying to recover from a pandemic that shocked all of us. And at the same time, we're just trying to pretend to be somebody that we're not. And it was just that moment when I was talking to my friend, where it just came out. And it was just, man, I feel like the black sheep. I feel like I can't keep up with our classmates, our colleagues, man. And it's just that moment where that little person you're being vulnerable to, where you finally break down the walls and finally stop pretending. He goes, yeah, me too. You're not alone. Oh man, I hope that we can start doing more of that. We can start doing more of that. Because when we start doing that, stop pretending, it's admitting to ourselves, admitting to our world and our society that we can finally work towards healing. We can finally work towards to being a better society, a better culture, or a better version of ourselves. When we come to the point where, man, yeah, me too. Yeah, I was thinking about that same thing. I'm tired. I want change. And that's where you begin to start moving towards a better place, moving towards healing. And that's what our world needs more than anything else. That's what I need. That's what our world needs. And I want to hear, God calls us not to be perfect, but He calls us to be real. When we can get to the place of vulnerability and get to a place of being real, we will find love and grace there. And most importantly, we'll find forgiveness there for ourselves and for other people.